All right, Jeremy Ruckert's off to the NFL. The tight end position, let's see, got him 26 receptions for 3 touchdowns. It's never going to be prolific, especially with all those targets going to the wide receivers. But is this Cade Stover's to lose? Who else is in the mix?
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting. We saw Cade Stover move back to the defensive side of the ball where he started his Ohio State career for the Michigan game and the Rose Bowl, just because Ohio State needed some help at linebacker. Where Cade Stover ends up is going to be determined this offseason. If I had to guess right after the Rose Bowl, when we talked to Cade Stover, I'd say he wants to play on the defensive side of the ball. Kevin Wilson made it sound like they were going to do what's best for Cade Stover and not so much what's best for the tight end room. As you mentioned, that's a group that doesn't need to catch a lot of balls. They do need to block, and that's going to be important. He's a guy who can do that. So if he ends up on offense at tight end, he's your number one guy for sure. If he's back on the defensive side, then you're going to go with some young guys there. And fortunately, they did get Mitch Rossi back. He's back for a 6th year, I believe. Former walk-on who he's more of a H-back, sometimes lines up as a fullback, but can certainly do the blocking aspects they ask of a tight end. Not going to catch a ton of passes. Then behind him, G. Scott Jr., former top-ranked wide receiver who will now be in his 2nd full year as a tight end. You've got Joe Royer, who they really liked as he'll be a sophomore this upcoming year. He's a guy that Kevin Wilson was very high on. Sam Hart didn't play last year. He redshirted. So it'll be very interesting to see what they do with this tight end group. As you mentioned, the receivers are going to catch most of the passes. You need the guys that are going to be able to block and make those plays like Luke Farrell 2 years ago, like Jeremy Ruckert the last couple of years did when called upon. You know, Ruckert caught some really big passes for Ohio State. You go back to the college football playoff game against Clemson. You go to a Penn State game 2 years ago where he caught, I think, 2 touchdowns in that game. So the Titans need to be able to not only block, but make plays when called upon. When you have a young group like this group may be, maybe you focus even less on getting them the ball. But a guy like G. Scott Jr. could be big in the passing game for Ohio State, relatively to what we've seen from tight ends, given the talent he has when he was a wide receiver.
I believe Rutgers had that one-handed catch against Alabama down the seam to set up the first touchdown as well. Scott caught 5, Rossi 4, and Royer 1 in limited duty for the Buckeyes at tight end last season.